Alright guys, um, Exodus 33. A couple things stood out to me today, but keep in mind that, typically multiple things kind of stand out, but I try and focus in on maybe one thing that I can pass off shortly to maybe be an encouragement to others. But you should really kind of go through the chapter and pray about it and just see what God points out to you. The two things that really stood out to me was in chapter 3, in verse 3, he says, he's talking, or actually if we back up to verse 2, it says, I will send an angel before thee, and I will drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzite, the Hivite, the Jebusites, and then verse 3, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. For I will not go up in the midst of thee, for thou art a stiff-necked people, lest I consume thee in the way. And we see this as kind of like a negative thing, like God is not going to dwell with them because they're stiff-necked people, and he's doing this kind of as a judgment. But it's really not. He says, lest I consume thee in the way. And we see that at the end of the chapter, that God's holiness is such that no man can see his face and live. So, this is keeping all of this in context. What God is telling them is, look, because you guys are sinful, because you guys are rebellious, it's better for you that I not dwell in the midst of you, because my holiness is such that it would burn you up. So that was one thing that stood out to me. And we don't always see that type of thing, that separation, as a grace, but it is. That veil existed as a grace until Jesus tore the veil, and at which point now we have the ability to have fellowship, with the Father. And then going on into verse 14, this was probably the biggest thing that stood out to me. If we back up to 13, he says, Now therefore I pray thee, if I have found grace in thy sight, show me now the way, that I may know thee, that I may find grace in thy sight, and consider that this nation is thy people. So Moses is telling God, look, if I've found grace in your sight, show me the way that I need to go, and show me that I have found grace in your sight, and consider that these people that I'm with, they're your people. So, and then in verse 14, God responds and he says, My presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest. And he said unto him, If thy presence go not with me, carry us not up hence. So, God tells Moses that I will go with you, and that I will give you rest. I will bring you to that place of rest. And we've talked about that before, how that place of rest is in the book of Exodus, is talking about this land of milk and honey, but it's also somewhat symbolic of our Christian life and that rest that God brings us into when we finally stop trusting in ourselves and learn to trust in Him. But the part that really stood out to me was when Moses says, or when God says, my presence will go with you, I will give thee rest. And this is Moses' response. And this is the heart of somebody who has a true passion and desire for God versus someone who has a true passion and desire for the things that God can give them. Moses says, And he said unto him, If thy presence go not with me, carry us not up hence. So their entire conversation is based on God is telling them, I'm going to bring you to this place of rest, and I'm going to go with you. And Moses says, all right, but if you're not going to go with us, don't take me to this place of rest. And the point being is that Moses was so focused and so intent on his relationship with God that he was perfectly content to stay in the wilderness, to stay in the desert, and not reach that place of rest if it meant that he could continue being in God's presence, continue to be in that relationship with God. And this is something that I hear people talk about. Well, heaven's going to be boring. What am I going to do in heaven? So on and so forth. If that's your point, I would question what your real motive is. Is heaven to you just a means of escaping the other alternative, hell? Of course everybody wants to go to heaven and not go to hell, but that's not what heaven is. Heaven is heaven because it's where God is. Hell is hell because it's where God isn't. And our focus should be on, just like Moses here, that God, I will go wherever you are. I just want to be where you are. If that's in heaven, fine. If it's here on the earth, fine. If I'm going through a valley in my life, but you're with me, I would rather be there than be blessed and be without you. So it really kind of shows the heart of Moses, and it should show us what our heart should be as well. So I wanted to go ahead and share that. So God bless.